Question 1. The analysis reveals that a candidate for the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam has inadvertently come into possession of information that, while not explicitly classified, pertains to the internal operational planning of a public sector entity that might be relevant to the exam's subject matter. The candidate is unsure whether using this information in their exam preparation constitutes an ethical breach or a violation of exam regulations. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the candidate? Option A. Seek clarification from the examination board or relevant administrative authority regarding the permissible use of such information and refrain from using it until official guidance is received. Option B. Discuss the nature of the information with other candidates to gauge their understanding and potential use of similar information. Option C. Proceed with using the information for exam preparation, assuming that as long as it is not classified, it is permissible for general study. Option D. Immediately withdraw from the examination process to avoid any potential ethical or regulatory complications. Correct answer is A. Seek clarification from the examination board or relevant administrative authority regarding the permissible use of such information and refrain from using it until official guidance is received. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where an aspiring administrator, preparing for the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam, must demonstrate a nuanced understanding of Algerian administrative law and public service ethics. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate course of action when faced with a situation that could potentially involve a conflict of interest or the misuse of privileged information, even if indirectly. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of integrity, impartiality, and public trust, which are foundational to public administration in Algeria. The correct approach involves prioritizing ethical conduct and adherence to the specific regulations governing public servants and candidates for public service in Algeria. This approach recognizes that even the perception of impropriety can undermine public confidence. It necessitates a proactive stance in seeking clarification and ensuring that all actions are transparent and in full compliance with the Algerian Civil Service Statute and any relevant codes of conduct for exam candidates. This aligns with the overarching goal of the National School of Administration to train individuals who will serve the public interest with the highest ethical standards. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding without seeking clarification, assuming the information is permissible for use, fails to acknowledge the potential for ethical breaches and regulatory violations. This could lead to accusations of unfair advantage or the use of non-public information, which is strictly prohibited. Another incorrect approach, that of withdrawing from the exam process entirely without understanding the specific nature of the information and its potential implications, might be an overreaction and could prevent a deserving candidate from participating. It does not demonstrate the problem-solving and ethical navigation skills expected of future administrators. Finally, an approach that involves discussing the information with other candidates before seeking official guidance risks spreading potentially sensitive information and creating an environment of suspicion or collusion, which is contrary to the principles of fair competition and individual merit. Professionals in public administration must develop a robust decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical dilemmas or conflicts with regulations. This is followed by a thorough understanding of the relevant legal and ethical frameworks, seeking guidance from appropriate authorities when in doubt, and acting with transparency and integrity. The ultimate aim is to safeguard public interest and uphold the reputation of public service. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that certain sections of the recent Algeria National School of Administration entrance examination may have been influenced by procedural inconsistencies that could potentially impact the fairness of the selection process. The review highlights the need for a decisive and legally sound response to uphold the integrity of the examination. Option A. Initiate a comprehensive reevaluation of all examination papers, focusing on identifying specific instances of procedural deviation and their impact on candidate scores, followed by targeted remedial actions based on objective findings. Option B. Immediately disqualify all candidates from the affected examination sections pending a thorough investigation to prevent any potential unfair advantage. Option C. Address only the most obvious procedural errors, while deferring the investigation of more complex potential biases to a later date to expedite the announcement of results. Option D. Postpone the announcement of results indefinitely until a complete overhaul of the examination system can be implemented to ensure absolute future fairness. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive reevaluation of all examination papers, focusing on identifying specific instances of procedural deviation and their impact on candidate scores, followed by targeted remedial actions based on objective findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for administrative efficiency with the long-term imperative of upholding the integrity and fairness of public service recruitment, as mandated by Algerian administrative law and the specific regulations governing the National School of Administration (ENA). The challenge lies in identifying and rectifying potential biases or procedural irregularities without causing undue disruption or undermining confidence in the examination process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any corrective actions are proportionate, transparent, and legally sound. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based review of the examination process, focusing on identifying specific procedural deviations or potential biases that could compromise fairness. This approach aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative justice enshrined in Algerian law, which emphasize transparency, impartiality, and meritocracy in public appointments. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulations that aim to ensure equal opportunity and prevent arbitrary decision-making in the selection of future public administrators. The focus on objective criteria and documented evidence is crucial for maintaining the credibility of the ENA entrance exam. An approach that prioritizes immediate dismissal of all candidates based on a general suspicion of irregularities is professionally unacceptable. This would violate the principle of due process, as candidates would be penalized without individual assessment of their involvement or the impact of any identified issues on their performance. It also fails to uphold the presumption of innocence and could lead to significant reputational damage for the ENA and the public administration. Furthermore, such an action would likely contravene administrative procedures that require thorough investigation and evidence before disciplinary measures are taken. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively addressing minor procedural issues while ignoring potential systemic biases, is also professionally flawed. A superficial fix fails to address the root causes of any unfairness and may perpetuate inequalities. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to comprehensive reform and could lead to continued challenges in future examinations. This approach neglects the ethical obligation to ensure a truly equitable selection process. Finally, an approach that involves delaying any action indefinitely due to the complexity of the review is professionally irresponsible. This inaction allows potential injustices to persist and erodes public trust in the examination system. It signifies a failure to uphold the duty of care and the obligation to act decisively when administrative integrity is compromised. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the reported concerns and initiating a preliminary assessment to determine the scope and nature of potential issues. 2. Establishing an objective and legally compliant investigation framework. 3. Gathering and analyzing all relevant evidence, including documentation, witness testimonies, and statistical data, to identify specific irregularities or biases. 4. Consulting with legal counsel and relevant administrative bodies to ensure all proposed actions are in accordance with Algerian law and ENA regulations. 5. Implementing proportionate and transparent corrective measures, which may include re-evaluation, re-examination, or disciplinary actions based on the findings. 6. Communicating the findings and actions taken to relevant stakeholders in a clear and timely manner to maintain transparency and public confidence. Question 3. To address the challenge of presenting a strong application for the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam, a candidate discovers a minor discrepancy in their academic transcript that, if corrected, would slightly improve their GPA. The candidate considers submitting a revised transcript with the correction, believing it would better reflect their capabilities. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Seek official clarification from the Algeria National School of Administration regarding the discrepancy and follow their guidance on how to proceed with the transcript. Option B. Submit a revised academic transcript with the correction, assuming the improvement is minor and the intention is to present a more accurate reflection of their academic performance. Option C. Submit the original, unaltered academic transcript, even with the minor discrepancy, and focus on other aspects of the application to highlight strengths. Option D. Create a supplementary document explaining the discrepancy and the candidate's efforts to address it, without altering the original transcript. The correct answer is C. Submit the original, unaltered academic transcript, even with the minor discrepancy, and focus on other aspects of the application to highlight strengths. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical imperative of transparency and the legal obligation to adhere to the Algerian National School of Administration's entrance exam regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the candidate's desire to present their qualifications effectively with the strict rules governing the application process, specifically regarding the authenticity and originality of submitted documents. Misrepresenting information or submitting falsified documents can lead to severe consequences, including disqualification and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a commitment to honesty and adherence to the stated examination guidelines. This means ensuring all submitted documents are genuine and accurately reflect the candidate's academic and professional background. The Algerian National School of Administration, like any reputable institution, mandates that all application materials be truthful and verifiable. Submitting a document that is not entirely authentic, even if it highlights a perceived strength, violates this fundamental principle of integrity. The regulatory framework for such examinations implicitly or explicitly requires candidates to act in good faith and to present themselves truthfully. An incorrect approach would be to submit a document that is altered or fabricated. This constitutes a direct violation of the examination's integrity and the trust placed in candidates. Such an action is not only ethically reprehensible, but also likely breaches specific articles within the Algerian National School of Administration's examination regulations concerning academic honesty and the submission of false information. The consequences of such a breach are severe, ranging from immediate disqualification from the current examination to potential blacklisting from future admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to omit relevant information that might be perceived as a weakness, while still submitting a document that is technically accurate but misleading by omission. While not outright fabrication, this still undermines the principle of full disclosure and can be interpreted as an attempt to deceive the admissions committee. The examination process is designed to assess a candidate's complete profile, and selective presentation of information can distort this assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of all examination rules and regulations. Candidates must critically evaluate their qualifications against these requirements. If there is any doubt about the authenticity or appropriateness of a document, the candidate should err on the side of caution and seek clarification from the examination authorities or refrain from submitting the questionable document. Prioritizing integrity and transparency, even if it means presenting a less perfect profile, is paramount to maintaining ethical standards and ensuring a fair selection process. Question 4. The review process indicates that a member of the examination board for the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam has suggested that a candidate, who is a distant relative of a high-ranking official, should be given special consideration due to their perceived potential, even though this candidate's written examination scores are not among the highest. This suggestion is not based on any explicit criteria outlined in the official examination regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examination board to take in this situation, strictly adhering to the regulatory framework governing the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam? Option A. The examination board should convene a separate, informal meeting to discuss the candidate's potential outside of the official scoring process, and then incorporate their subjective assessment into the final decision. Option B. The examination board should politely decline the suggestion, emphasizing that all candidates must be evaluated solely based on the objective criteria and procedures established by the official regulations for the entrance examination, and proceed with the standard evaluation process. Option C. The examination board should inform the high-ranking official that their relative is being considered, and seek further guidance on how to best accommodate their request within the examination framework. Option D. The examination board should discreetly adjust the scoring of the candidate in question to reflect their perceived potential, ensuring that the adjustment is not overtly noticeable in the final results. The correct answer is B. The examination board should politely decline the suggestion, emphasizing that all candidates must be evaluated solely based on the objective criteria and procedures established by the official regulations for the entrance examination, and proceed with the standard evaluation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian administrative framework, specifically concerning the integrity and fairness of public service recruitment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient selection with the absolute requirement of adhering to established legal and regulatory procedures designed to prevent bias and ensure equal opportunity. The Algerian National School of Administration entrance exam is governed by specific decrees and ministerial orders that outline the selection criteria, examination procedures, and the composition of examination boards. Any deviation from these established norms, even with the intention of expediting a process or accommodating a perceived need, can undermine the legitimacy of the entire selection process and lead to legal challenges. The correct approach involves a rigorous adherence to the official examination regulations. This means ensuring that all candidates are evaluated solely on the merits of their applications and examination performance, as defined by the published criteria. It requires the examination board to act with impartiality, transparency, and in strict accordance with the procedural guidelines set forth by the relevant Algerian authorities. This approach is ethically sound and legally mandated, as it upholds the principles of meritocracy and equal access to public service, which are cornerstones of good governance in Algeria. An incorrect approach would be to introduce subjective considerations or to bypass established protocols. For instance, attempting to influence the selection of a candidate based on personal acquaintance or perceived potential, without explicit regulatory provision for such considerations, constitutes a breach of administrative law and ethical conduct. This could manifest as preferential treatment during the evaluation phase or the introduction of unannounced criteria. Such actions violate the principle of equal treatment for all candidates and can lead to accusations of favoritism, corruption, and a lack of transparency, thereby compromising the credibility of the National School of Administration and the public service it aims to staff. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the established examination format or scoring mechanisms, even if the intention is to identify candidates with specific, albeit unstated, desirable qualities. This undermines the fairness of the competition and can be challenged under administrative review processes. The professional decision-making process in such situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the governing regulations for the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam. When faced with a situation that appears to offer a shortcut or a deviation, the professional must first consult the relevant legal texts and administrative guidelines. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from the designated administrative authority or legal counsel within the institution is paramount. The guiding principle should always be the preservation of fairness, transparency, and adherence to the rule of law, ensuring that the selection process is robust, defensible, and serves the public interest. Question 5. What factors determine the ethical and legal permissibility of a civil servant's decision-making process when evaluating competing proposals for a public infrastructure project, considering the Algerian administrative framework? Option A. Prioritization of proposals from entities with whom the civil servant has a pre-existing professional acquaintance based on perceived efficiency. Option B. Expedited decision-making to meet project deadlines, even if it means bypassing certain procedural checks. Option C. Adherence to established objective evaluation criteria, transparency in the process, and impartial assessment based on merit and public interest. Option D. Consideration of personal opinions on the long-term viability of a proposal without documented evidence or objective justification. The correct answer is C. Adherence to established objective evaluation criteria, transparency in the process, and impartial assessment based on merit and public interest. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian public administration's commitment to transparency, accountability, and the equitable distribution of public resources, as enshrined in relevant administrative law and ethical codes governing civil servants. The core dilemma lies in balancing the need for efficient project execution with the imperative to uphold public trust and prevent any perception of favoritism or undue influence. A civil servant in this position must navigate the potential for conflicts of interest and ensure that all decisions are made in the best interest of the public good, adhering strictly to established procurement procedures and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a rigorous and impartial evaluation of all submitted proposals based solely on predefined objective criteria. This upholds the principles of fairness and equal opportunity, which are fundamental to public procurement in Algeria. By documenting the evaluation process meticulously and seeking independent review where necessary, the civil servant ensures accountability and mitigates the risk of bias. This aligns with the administrative principles of good governance and the legal framework governing public contracts, which prioritize meritocracy and prevent corruption. An incorrect approach that prioritizes personal relationships or perceived efficiency over established procedures is ethically unsound and legally problematic. Such an approach risks violating procurement laws designed to ensure fair competition and prevent corruption. It undermines public trust by creating an appearance of impropriety, even if no explicit wrongdoing occurred. Furthermore, disregarding objective criteria can lead to suboptimal outcomes for public projects, as the most qualified or cost-effective provider may be overlooked. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying the decision without a valid, documented reason can also be detrimental. While caution is necessary, undue delay can disrupt project timelines, increase costs, and potentially signal an inability to manage the process effectively, thereby eroding confidence in the administration. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable administrative laws and ethical codes. Professionals must first identify the core ethical principles at play, such as fairness, transparency, and accountability. They should then consult the specific regulations governing the decision-making process, such as procurement laws and internal administrative guidelines. A structured approach, involving objective criteria, thorough documentation, and seeking advice or review when in doubt, is crucial for making sound and defensible decisions that uphold public trust and administrative integrity. Question 6. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, more expensive, but technologically advanced system for processing citizen applications would significantly reduce long-term operational costs and improve efficiency. However, this system requires all applicants to have reliable internet access and a personal computer, which a substantial portion of the local population, particularly in rural areas, lacks. The administrator must decide how to proceed. Option A. Implement the new system but simultaneously launch a public initiative to provide subsidized internet access and computer training in affected areas, ensuring no citizen is disenfranchised. Option B. Postpone the decision indefinitely, citing the complexity of the situation and the need for further study, without proposing any interim solutions. Option C. Seek private sector partnerships to fund the new system and its associated infrastructure, without fully disclosing the potential exclusion of certain citizen groups during the negotiation phase. Option D. Implement the new system immediately, as the cost savings and efficiency gains are substantial and benefit the administration as a whole, leaving citizens to find their own solutions. The correct answer is A. Implement the new system but simultaneously launch a public initiative to provide subsidized internet access and computer training in affected areas, ensuring no citizen is disenfranchised. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian public administration context, specifically concerning the ethical implications of resource allocation and public trust. The administrator faces a conflict between a seemingly efficient, cost-saving measure and its potential to undermine public perception of fairness and equal access to essential services. The core of the challenge lies in balancing economic pragmatism with the fundamental principles of public service, which are guided by Algerian administrative law and ethical codes governing public officials. The correct approach prioritizes the long-term integrity of public institutions and adherence to the spirit of equitable service delivery, even if it incurs short-term costs. This involves a commitment to transparency, fairness, and the avoidance of any perception of favoritism or exclusion. The Algerian legal framework for public administration emphasizes the public interest and the duty of officials to act impartially, and in accordance with established regulations and ethical standards. This approach aligns with the principle that public resources are managed for the benefit of all citizens, not just those who can most easily access or afford alternative solutions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering the broader implications risks violating ethical principles and potentially administrative regulations. Such an approach could be seen as neglecting the duty to serve all segments of the population equally, thereby eroding public trust. Another incorrect approach, which might involve seeking external funding without proper authorization or transparency, could lead to conflicts of interest or circumvent established budgetary and procurement procedures, which are strictly regulated in Algerian public administration. A third incorrect approach, which involves delaying the decision or ignoring the issue, demonstrates a failure to exercise responsible leadership and uphold the administrator's duty to address challenges proactively and ethically. Professionals in Algerian public administration should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant legal and ethical obligations. This involves consulting applicable laws, decrees, and internal administrative guidelines. They should then consider the potential impact of each option on all stakeholders, particularly vulnerable populations. Ethical considerations, such as fairness, equity, and transparency, must be weighed alongside economic factors. Seeking advice from legal counsel or ethics committees within the administration is also a crucial step when faced with complex dilemmas. Ultimately, the decision must be justifiable based on the public interest and adherence to the highest standards of public service. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that a new technology could significantly improve the efficiency of a public service. As part of the preparatory phase for a future tender, a civil servant is tasked with understanding the market landscape and potential solutions. The civil servant has identified a few key companies that are leaders in this niche technology. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct approach to gather this essential market information within the framework of Algerian public procurement regulations? Option A. Develop a formal documented market research plan that outlines the objectives, methodology for engaging with potential suppliers, including criteria for selection of those to be consulted, and the types of information sought, and then share this plan with a broader group of identified potential suppliers, inviting them to provide input. Option B. Rely exclusively on publicly available information and reports from industry associations, without directly engaging with any specific companies, to avoid any perception of favoritism. Option C. Conduct informal, one-on-one meetings with the identified leading companies to understand their capabilities and pricing, without informing other potential market players about these discussions. Option D. Directly approach the largest and most established company in the sector, assuming they possess the most comprehensive understanding of the market, and base all procurement planning on their input. The correct answer is C. Conduct informal, one-on-one meetings with the identified leading companies to understand their capabilities and pricing, without informing other potential market players about these discussions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian public administration's commitment to transparency, impartiality, and the efficient use of public resources. As guided by the Algerian Public Procurement Code, Code des Marchés Publics, and the general ethical principles governing civil servants. The core dilemma lies in balancing the need for thorough market analysis with the imperative to avoid any perception of favoritism or undue influence that could compromise the integrity of the procurement process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the information gathered serves the public interest, without creating an unfair advantage for any potential bidder. The correct approach involves a structured and documented process of information gathering that is applied equally to all potential suppliers. This ensures that the administration bases its decisions on objective criteria and a comprehensive understanding of the market, thereby promoting fair competition and the best value for public funds. Specifically, adhering to the principles of transparency and equal treatment enshrined in the Algerian Public Procurement Code is paramount. This means that any market research conducted must be documented, and the methodology for engaging with potential suppliers must be consistent and non-discriminatory. The goal is to inform the procurement strategy, not to pre-select or unduly influence bidders. An incorrect approach would be to engage in informal discussions with a limited number of suppliers, without a clear, documented methodology, or without informing other potential bidders of the intent to gather market information. This risks creating an uneven playing field and can lead to accusations of bias or collusion, violating the principles of transparency and fair competition. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on information provided by a single, dominant supplier, as this lacks the necessary breadth for objective decision-making and could lead to suboptimal procurement outcomes. Furthermore, failing to document the market research process and its findings would undermine accountability and make it difficult to justify the chosen procurement strategy if challenged. Professionals in public administration should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal and ethical standards. This involves clearly defining the objectives of market research, establishing a transparent and documented methodology for information gathering, ensuring equal opportunity for all relevant stakeholders to provide input, and rigorously documenting all interactions and findings. When faced with potential conflicts or perceptions of impropriety, professionals should err on the side of caution, seeking guidance from superiors or relevant oversight bodies to ensure compliance with regulations and ethical guidelines. Question 8. The control framework reveals that an administrator at the Algeria National School of Administration is responsible for overseeing a competitive bidding process for essential administrative software. The administrator discovers that one of the most qualified bidders is a company owned by their sibling. The administrator has a close personal relationship with their sibling and has previously provided informal advice to the company. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the administrator to take? Option A. Disclose the relationship to their direct supervisor and continue to participate in the evaluation, assuming the supervisor's awareness is sufficient. Option B. Proceed with the evaluation but ensure the sibling's bid is not favored, believing their professional integrity will prevent bias. Option C. Attempt to subtly alter the evaluation criteria to make the sibling's bid less competitive, thereby avoiding direct favoritism. Option D. Immediately recuse themselves from all aspects of the bidding process, including evaluation, recommendation, and final decision-making, and formally document this recusal. The correct answer is D. Immediately recuse themselves from all aspects of the bidding process, including evaluation, recommendation, and final decision-making, and formally document this recusal. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between personal gain and the public interest, a core concern within public administration and governance. The administrator is entrusted with public resources and decision-making authority, necessitating a commitment to impartiality and ethical conduct. The dilemma arises from the administrator's personal relationship with a potential contractor, which could compromise their objectivity in the procurement process. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of public administration and maintain public trust. The correct approach involves recusing oneself from any decision-making process related to the contract award. This upholds the principle of impartiality and avoids any appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. Algerian administrative law and ethical codes for public officials emphasize the importance of transparency, fairness, and the avoidance of situations that could lead to favoritism or corruption. By stepping aside, the administrator ensures that the selection process is conducted without personal bias, adhering to the principles of good governance and the public interest. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the evaluation and recommendation, despite the personal relationship. This would constitute a failure to manage a clear conflict of interest, potentially violating principles of administrative fairness and integrity enshrined in Algerian public service regulations. Such an action could lead to accusations of favoritism, undermine the credibility of the procurement process, and erode public trust in the institution. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the relationship to a superior, but still participate in the decision-making, believing that disclosure absolves them of responsibility. While disclosure is a step, it does not negate the conflict of interest if participation continues. Algerian administrative ethics require active measures to prevent conflicts, not just passive disclosure when personal involvement is ongoing. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to influence the evaluation criteria to disadvantage the connected contractor, believing this would somehow mitigate the conflict. This is unethical and illegal, as it involves manipulating the process for personal reasons, even if the intent is to avoid favoritism. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the fundamental principles of fair competition and objective evaluation. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify the potential conflict of interest. Second, consult relevant ethical codes, administrative laws, and internal policies of the Algerian National School of Administration. Third, seek guidance from a designated ethics officer or legal counsel within the institution. Fourth, prioritize the public interest and the principles of integrity and impartiality. Finally, take decisive action to manage or eliminate the conflict, which may include recusal, disclosure, or seeking reassignment from the matter. Question 9. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential misinterpretation of recent policy changes implemented by a public administration department, leading to significant concern among a key industry association. The association is requesting an immediate public clarification and has implied that their continued cooperation on future initiatives is contingent on a swift and favorable response. What is the most appropriate course of action for the public administration department? Option A. Immediately issue a public statement that aligns with the industry association's interpretation to appease them and secure their cooperation. Option B. Publicly dismiss the feedback as a misunderstanding without further investigation to avoid creating unnecessary alarm. Option C. Initiate an internal review to verify the accuracy and context of the feedback, and then communicate the findings and any necessary clarifications to all relevant stakeholders through official channels. Option D. Share a preliminary, unverified explanation directly with the industry association to address their immediate concerns, without informing other stakeholders. Correct answer is C. Initiate an internal review to verify the accuracy and context of the feedback, and then communicate the findings and any necessary clarifications to all relevant stakeholders through official channels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for transparency and the potential for reputational damage or competitive disadvantage. A public servant must navigate the delicate balance of fulfilling their duty to inform stakeholders while upholding the principles of good governance and administrative integrity, as mandated by Algerian administrative law and the ethical code governing public service. The pressure from a powerful stakeholder group adds a layer of complexity, requiring careful consideration of influence and potential bias. The correct approach involves a measured and principled response that prioritizes accurate information dissemination while adhering to established protocols. This means acknowledging the feedback, initiating a thorough internal review to verify the information's accuracy and context, and then communicating findings transparently and objectively to all relevant stakeholders, including the concerned group, through appropriate official channels. This aligns with the Algerian administrative principles of transparency, accountability, and the duty to inform citizens and stakeholders about public administration activities and decisions. It also reflects the ethical obligation to act with impartiality and to avoid undue influence from any single group. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback outright without investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of responsiveness to stakeholder concerns and could be seen as a dereliction of duty, potentially violating administrative guidelines that encourage engagement and feedback mechanisms. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately concede to the stakeholders' demands or to release partial or unverified information to appease them. This compromises objectivity and could lead to misinformation, damage the credibility of the administration, and violate the ethical imperative to act in the public interest rather than succumbing to pressure. Furthermore, selectively sharing information only with the demanding stakeholder group would be a breach of fairness and transparency, violating the principle of equal access to information for all relevant parties. Professionals in public administration should employ a structured decision-making process when faced with such feedback. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the feedback received. 2. Assessing the credibility and nature of the feedback. 3. Initiating a fact-finding or verification process, consulting relevant internal policies and regulations. 4. Determining the appropriate communication strategy based on the findings, ensuring fairness, accuracy, and timeliness. 5. Communicating the outcome through established official channels to all affected stakeholders. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are grounded in facts, adhere to legal and ethical standards, and maintain public trust. Question 10. Compliance review shows that an administrator responsible for evaluating applications for a subsidized public housing program has a close family member who has submitted an application. The administrator is aware of the family member's eligibility criteria and believes they meet them. The administrator has not yet reviewed this specific application. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the administrator? Option A. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from reviewing or making any decisions regarding the family member's application. Option B. Proceed with reviewing the application, ensuring they remain objective and fair, as they are confident in their ability to make an impartial decision. Option C. Discreetly inform the family member about specific aspects of the application process that could strengthen their submission, without explicitly stating favoritism. Option D. Reject the family member's application without a full review, citing the potential for perceived bias due to the familial connection. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from reviewing or making any decisions regarding the family member's application. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between personal relationships and the impartial execution of administrative duties, a core tenet of public service ethics in Algeria. The administrator is tasked with evaluating applications for a public housing program, a process that demands fairness and adherence to established criteria. The involvement of a close family member introduces a significant risk of bias, either conscious or unconscious, which could compromise the integrity of the selection process and erode public trust. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation in a manner that upholds both legal obligations and ethical standards. The correct approach involves immediate disclosure of the conflict of interest and recusal from the decision-making process concerning the family member's application. This aligns with the principles of transparency, impartiality, and accountability enshrined in Algerian administrative law and public service ethics guidelines. By disclosing the relationship, the administrator signals their commitment to avoiding any appearance of impropriety. Recusal ensures that the evaluation of the family member's application is handled by an unbiased party, thereby safeguarding the fairness of the program and maintaining public confidence in the administrative process. This proactive measure prevents potential accusations of favoritism and upholds the principle that public resources should be allocated based on merit and need, not personal connections. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the evaluation without disclosure, hoping to remain impartial. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risk of bias and the perception it creates. It violates the ethical obligation to avoid conflicts of interest and could lead to accusations of favoritism, undermining the legitimacy of the housing program and the administrator's professional standing. Such an action could also contravene specific provisions within Algerian administrative regulations that mandate the reporting of potential conflicts. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly influence the evaluation process in favor of the family member, even if the administrator believes they are acting out of familial obligation. This is a direct breach of administrative ethics and potentially illegal, as it constitutes an abuse of power and a violation of the principle of equal treatment for all applicants. It prioritizes personal relationships over public duty and the rule of law. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the family member's application outright due to the relationship, without a proper evaluation based on the program's criteria. While seemingly avoiding favoritism, this also introduces bias, albeit in the opposite direction. It prevents the family member from being considered on their merits and could be seen as unfair discrimination, again compromising the integrity of the selection process. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should begin with identifying any potential conflicts of interest. This involves a thorough understanding of one's duties and responsibilities, as well as an awareness of personal relationships that might impinge upon those duties. Once a potential conflict is identified, the next step is to consult relevant regulations and ethical guidelines. In this case, Algerian administrative law and public service ethics codes would be paramount. The principle of transparency dictates that such conflicts must be disclosed to the appropriate authorities or supervisors. Following disclosure, recusal from any decision-making process directly affected by the conflict is generally the most appropriate course of action to ensure impartiality and maintain public trust. Question 11. Benchmark analysis indicates that a candidate for the Algeria National School of Administration, while still in their final year of studies, is approached by a close family friend who is a senior official in a ministry. This friend offers the candidate a significant advantage in securing a highly sought-after internship within that ministry upon graduation, contingent on the candidate's successful admission to the school. The candidate is aware that this internship could significantly boost their future career prospects within the public administration. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the candidate? Option A. Politely decline the offer of assistance and inform the family friend that they prefer to secure any future opportunities through their own merit and the standard admission and internship selection processes. Option B. Inform the family friend that while they appreciate the gesture, they will be reporting the offer to the admissions committee of the Algeria National School of Administration to ensure transparency and adherence to ethical guidelines. Option C. Acknowledge the offer but express reservations, suggesting that the family friend should wait until the candidate has successfully completed their studies and been admitted to the school before any further discussion. Option D. Immediately accept the offer of assistance from the family friend, as it represents a valuable networking opportunity and a potential career advantage. The correct answer is D. Immediately accept the offer of assistance from the family friend, as it represents a valuable networking opportunity and a potential career advantage. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian National School of Administration's commitment to ethical conduct and public service integrity, as implicitly governed by the principles of good governance and administrative law in Algeria. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate personal benefit of a potentially advantageous opportunity with the overarching duty of impartiality and the avoidance of conflicts of interest that could undermine public trust. A future administrator must navigate situations where personal relationships might intersect with professional responsibilities, ensuring that decisions are made solely in the public interest, free from undue influence or the appearance of impropriety. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate supervisory authority. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical principles and adherence to the administrative framework that prioritizes integrity and accountability. By reporting the situation, the individual allows for an objective assessment and management of the conflict, safeguarding the fairness and impartiality of administrative processes. This aligns with the fundamental tenets of public administration, which demand that officials act in the best interest of the state and its citizens, not for personal gain. An incorrect approach would be to accept the offer without disclosure. This constitutes a failure to uphold the duty of impartiality and could lead to a perception of favoritism or corruption, eroding public confidence in the administration. Such an action directly contravenes the ethical obligations of public servants to avoid situations that could compromise their professional judgment or create a conflict between personal interests and public duties. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to downplay the significance of the relationship or the offer. This is ethically unsound as it involves a lack of transparency and honesty, and it fails to acknowledge the potential for bias, however unintentional. It also bypasses the established procedures for managing conflicts of interest, which are designed to protect the integrity of the administrative system. Professionals in administrative roles should adopt a decision-making process that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest. This involves a critical self-assessment of any personal relationships or financial interests that could influence professional judgment. Following identification, the next step is to consult relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and administrative laws governing conflicts of interest in Algeria. If a conflict is confirmed or suspected, the professional must then proactively disclose the situation to their superior or the designated ethics committee, seeking guidance on how to manage or recuse themselves from the situation. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made with integrity and in accordance with the highest ethical standards of public service. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that a mid-level administrator in an Algerian public agency, responsible for awarding contracts for public works, has a close personal friend who owns a construction company bidding for a significant project. The administrator is aware of this relationship and the potential for it to be perceived as a conflict of interest, even though their professional conduct has always been impartial. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the administrator? Option A. Discreetly contact their friend to offer advice on how to strengthen their bid, emphasizing that this is purely a friendly gesture and not an attempt to influence the outcome. Option B. Abstain from any involvement in the contract evaluation process without formally notifying anyone, hoping the situation resolves itself without their intervention. Option C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and request guidance on recusal or delegation of the decision-making authority for this specific contract. Option D. Proceed with evaluating the bid objectively, believing their personal integrity will prevent any undue influence, and avoid mentioning the relationship to avoid unnecessary complications. Correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and request guidance on recusal or delegation of the decision-making authority for this specific contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian public administration's commitment to transparency, impartiality, and the avoidance of conflicts of interest, as enshrined in the Algerian Civil Service Statute and relevant ethical codes governing public officials. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to leverage personal networks for public good with the imperative to maintain public trust and ensure equitable treatment for all citizens and entities. A public servant must navigate situations where personal relationships could inadvertently influence official decisions, potentially leading to favoritism or the perception thereof. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of administrative processes. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the relevant superior authority. This demonstrates adherence to the principles of accountability and integrity. By informing the supervisor, the public servant allows for an objective assessment of the situation and enables the administration to implement appropriate measures, such as recusal from the decision-making process or delegation to another official. This aligns with the spirit of Article 30 of the Algerian Civil Service Statute, which implicitly requires public servants to act with impartiality and avoid situations that could compromise their duties. It also reflects general ethical principles of public service that prioritize the public interest over personal connections. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the decision without disclosure risks violating the principle of impartiality and could lead to accusations of favoritism. This directly contravenes the ethical obligations of a public servant to treat all citizens and entities equally, regardless of personal acquaintance. Such an action could undermine public confidence in the administration's fairness and integrity. Another incorrect approach of seeking to influence the decision through informal channels, even with good intentions, is equally problematic. This bypasses established administrative procedures and introduces an element of personal bias into the decision-making process. It creates an uneven playing field and can be perceived as an abuse of influence, violating the duty of probity and the principle of equal access to public services. A further incorrect approach of ignoring the potential conflict and hoping it goes unnoticed is a failure of professional responsibility. It demonstrates a lack of ethical awareness and a disregard for the established rules and principles governing public service. This passive approach can lead to more significant ethical breaches and damage to the reputation of both the individual and the administration. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear self-assessment of potential conflicts, followed by immediate and transparent communication with superiors. When in doubt, seeking guidance from the ethics committee or legal department within the administration is crucial. The guiding principle should always be to act in a manner that upholds the public trust and ensures the integrity and fairness of administrative actions. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates that the IT department of a local Algerian public administration office is experiencing a critical shortage of essential computer equipment, significantly hindering its ability to process citizen requests efficiently. The head of the department is aware of a reliable local supplier who can provide the needed equipment immediately, but initiating a formal procurement process through the established Algerian administrative channels would take several weeks, potentially exacerbating the service delivery issues. What is the most appropriate course of action for the head of the department to address this situation, strictly adhering to the regulatory framework governing Algerian public administration? Option A. Initiate the formal procurement process through the appropriate administrative channels, documenting the critical need and the potential impact of delays on public service. Option B. Request an informal loan of equipment from a neighboring public administration office to temporarily alleviate the shortage, while the formal procurement process is underway. Option C. Immediately purchase the equipment from the known local supplier to resolve the operational bottleneck and ensure continued efficient service delivery. Option D. Postpone the equipment acquisition until the formal procurement process can be completed without any deviation from standard procedures, even if it means a prolonged period of reduced service efficiency. The correct answer is C. Immediately purchase the equipment from the known local supplier to resolve the operational bottleneck and ensure continued efficient service delivery. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian civil service's commitment to impartiality and the efficient allocation of public resources. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate needs of a public service department with the established procedures for resource acquisition, ensuring fairness and preventing potential conflicts of interest or favoritism. The decision-maker must navigate the tension between expediency and adherence to regulatory frameworks designed to uphold public trust and accountability. The correct approach involves a structured, transparent, and compliant process for addressing the identified equipment shortage. This means initiating a formal request through the appropriate administrative channels, which would typically involve a needs assessment, budget allocation, and procurement procedures as outlined by Algerian public administration regulations. This approach upholds the principles of good governance, fiscal responsibility, and equal opportunity for suppliers, thereby safeguarding public funds and maintaining the integrity of administrative processes. An incorrect approach would be to bypass established procurement procedures by directly purchasing equipment from a known supplier without competitive bidding or formal authorization. This action, while seemingly expedient, violates Algerian public procurement laws and regulations, which mandate transparency and fairness in the acquisition of public goods. Such a deviation risks accusations of favoritism, potential financial irregularities, and undermines the principle of value for money. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the acquisition indefinitely, citing bureaucratic hurdles. While acknowledging procedural complexities is important, inaction in the face of a critical operational need can lead to a decline in public service delivery, impacting citizens and the overall efficiency of the administration. This passive stance fails to uphold the duty of public servants to act diligently and effectively in their roles. A third incorrect approach would be to seek an informal loan of equipment from another public entity, without proper interagency agreement or consideration of the lending entity's own operational needs. This could create unforeseen complications and strain interdepartmental relations, bypassing established protocols for resource sharing and potentially creating an unrecorded liability. The professional decision-making framework for such situations should prioritize adherence to the Algerian administrative and financial regulations governing public procurement and resource management. This involves understanding the legal framework, identifying the operational need, exploring all compliant solutions, and documenting the decision-making process thoroughly. When faced with potential delays or inefficiencies in the formal process, professionals should advocate for procedural improvements or seek authorized exceptions, rather than resorting to non-compliant shortcuts. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a proposal submitted by a close acquaintance of a senior administrator is being fast-tracked for approval, potentially bypassing standard evaluation protocols. The administrator is aware of the acquaintance's past contributions to their personal network. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach for the administrator to take, adhering strictly to Algerian administrative law and public service ethics? Option A. Seek informal advice from the acquaintance on how to best present the proposal for a swift approval, leveraging their understanding of the administrator's priorities. Option B. Expedite the approval process to acknowledge the acquaintance's past contributions and maintain a positive relationship, assuming the proposal is likely beneficial. Option C. Ensure the proposal undergoes the full, standard evaluation process, declaring the personal acquaintance to relevant oversight bodies, and recusing themselves from any decision-making directly impacting the proposal's approval. Option D. Approve the proposal immediately based on the acquaintance's reputation and the administrator's personal trust, to avoid any perception of bias or delay. The correct answer is C. Ensure the proposal undergoes the full, standard evaluation process, declaring the personal acquaintance to relevant oversight bodies, and recusing themselves from any decision-making directly impacting the proposal's approval. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in balancing competing interests and adhering to the principles of good governance and administrative ethics as defined by Algerian administrative law and the regulations governing public service conduct. The core difficulty lies in navigating potential conflicts of interest and ensuring that decisions are made impartially, transparently, and in the public interest, rather than being influenced by personal relationships or perceived future benefits. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the administrative process. The correct approach involves a rigorous and transparent application of established procedures for evaluating proposals, prioritizing objective criteria, and ensuring that any potential conflicts of interest are declared and managed according to the relevant Algerian administrative regulations and ethical codes of conduct for public officials. This approach upholds the principles of impartiality, fairness, and accountability, which are fundamental to public administration in Algeria. It ensures that decisions are based on merit and the public good, thereby fostering trust in the institution. An incorrect approach that prioritizes personal relationships over objective evaluation would violate the principles of administrative impartiality and equal treatment enshrined in Algerian law, could lead to favoritism, corruption, and a loss of public confidence, undermining the legitimacy of administrative decisions. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying a decision to seek personal advice outside of formal channels, without proper disclosure and authorization, could be seen as an attempt to circumvent established procedures or to gain an unfair advantage, potentially breaching confidentiality and ethical guidelines. A further incorrect approach that involves accepting the proposal without thorough due diligence, based on the proposer's reputation or perceived influence, neglects the administrative duty to ensure that all decisions are well-founded, evidence-based, and aligned with public policy objectives. This can lead to suboptimal outcomes and a failure to protect public resources. The professional decision-making framework for such situations should involve 1. Identifying the core issue and potential conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting relevant Algerian administrative laws, regulations, and internal ethical guidelines. 3. Seeking advice from appropriate internal authorities or legal counsel if ambiguity exists. 4. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made. 5. Prioritizing transparency, impartiality, and the public interest in all actions. Question 15. The audit findings indicate significant procedural irregularities in the procurement process for a major public infrastructure project, raising concerns about potential mismanagement and the misuse of public funds. As the head of the relevant administrative department, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to uphold administrative integrity and ensure accountability? Option A. Immediately suspend the project and initiate a comprehensive, independent internal investigation to verify the audit's conclusions and identify specific responsibilities. Option B. Publicly announce the audit findings and implement immediate disciplinary actions against all personnel involved to demonstrate zero tolerance for misconduct. Option C. Request the audit report be reviewed by an external legal firm and await their recommendations before taking any action to avoid premature judgments. Option D. Instruct the audit team to revise their findings to mitigate potential reputational damage to the department and ensure project continuity. The correct answer is A. Immediately suspend the project and initiate a comprehensive, independent internal investigation to verify the audit's conclusions and identify specific responsibilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for transparency and accountability with the potential for reputational damage and the need for a thorough, unbiased investigation. The administrator must act decisively yet ethically, adhering strictly to the principles of good governance and administrative law as understood within the Algerian context. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that any corrective actions are proportionate, fair, and based on verified facts, rather than speculation or external pressure. The correct approach involves initiating a formal, independent investigation. This aligns with the principles of administrative due process and the requirement for objective fact-finding before any disciplinary or corrective measures are taken. Within the Algerian administrative framework, decisions impacting individuals or institutions must be grounded in evidence and follow established procedures to ensure fairness and legality. This approach upholds the integrity of the administrative process and protects against arbitrary actions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement punitive measures without a proper investigation. This fails to respect the right to a fair hearing and could lead to unjust outcomes, potentially violating administrative law principles that emphasize due process. Another incorrect approach is to suppress the findings to avoid public scrutiny. This undermines transparency and accountability, which are fundamental to good governance and public trust in administrative bodies. It also prevents the identification and rectification of systemic issues. Finally, an approach that relies solely on external advice without internal verification or due process is also flawed, as it abdicates responsibility for independent judgment and adherence to specific Algerian administrative procedures. Professionals in administrative roles should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based reasoning, adherence to legal and regulatory mandates, and ethical considerations. This involves 1. Acknowledging the findings and their potential implications. 2. Initiating a formal process to verify the facts. 3. Consulting relevant legal and regulatory frameworks. 4. Considering the impact on all stakeholders. 5. Making decisions based on verified facts and legal requirements. 6. Communicating actions transparently and appropriately. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that a candidate for the Algeria National School of Administration entrance exam has demonstrated exceptional problem-solving skills in a hypothetical administrative scenario presented in the written portion, but their performance on the general knowledge section was only satisfactory. However, a senior administrator who knows the candidate personally vouches for their strong work ethic and leadership potential, suggesting they would excel in the program despite the uneven exam results. Considering the regulatory framework for public administration entrance exams in Algeria, which approach to evaluating this candidate is most appropriate? Option A. Prioritize the candidate's demonstrated analytical skills in the scenario and satisfactory general knowledge performance, adhering strictly to the examination scoring criteria for both sections. Option B. Focus primarily on the candidate's perceived leadership potential and work ethic, as vouched for by the senior administrator, believing these qualities are more indicative of future administrative success than specific exam scores. Option C. Recommend a re-evaluation of the general knowledge section, assuming there might have been an error, to better align the candidate's overall performance with the administrator's strong endorsement. Option D. Give significant weight to the senior administrator's recommendation, considering it as strong evidence of the candidate's future success, and adjust the overall evaluation accordingly. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the candidate's demonstrated analytical skills in the scenario and satisfactory general knowledge performance, adhering strictly to the examination scoring criteria for both sections. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Algerian National School of Administration's commitment to meritocracy and equitable access to public service. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to identify candidates with exceptional potential against the imperative to uphold the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination process. A decision-maker must navigate the potential for subjective bias while adhering strictly to the established examination regulations and ethical guidelines governing public administration recruitment in Algeria. The correct approach involves a rigorous, objective assessment of the candidate's performance against the established examination criteria, prioritizing evidence of analytical skills and understanding of administrative principles as demonstrated within the exam itself. This aligns with Algerian administrative law principles that emphasize transparency, impartiality, and equal opportunity in public sector recruitment. The examination's purpose is to measure a candidate's preparedness for administrative roles based on defined competencies, not on external factors or subjective impressions. Adherence to the examination scoring rubric and evaluation guidelines is paramount to ensuring fairness and preventing any perception of favoritism. An incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal recommendations outside the scope of the examination criteria would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such an approach undermines the principle of meritocracy, potentially leading to the selection of less qualified candidates and eroding public trust in the examination process. It also violates the spirit and letter of regulations designed to ensure a level playing field for all applicants. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes a candidate's perceived potential based on subjective impressions rather than concrete performance within the examination would also be a failure. While identifying potential is a desirable outcome, it must be grounded in observable evidence and measurable competencies demonstrated during the assessment. Relying on vague notions of potential without a clear link to examination performance introduces subjectivity and opens the door to bias, contravening the objective standards expected in public administration recruitment. Professionals tasked with evaluating candidates for public administration roles should employ a structured decision-making framework. This framework begins with a thorough understanding of the examination's objectives and the specific criteria for evaluation as defined by the Algerian National School of Administration's regulations. It requires a commitment to objective assessment, focusing solely on the evidence presented within the examination materials. Decision-makers must consciously guard against personal biases and external influences, relying instead on established evaluation protocols and rubrics. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification from examination administrators or adhering to the most conservative interpretation of the rules that upholds fairness is crucial. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the selection process is both fair and effective in identifying individuals best suited for public service based on their demonstrated capabilities. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that an administrator is tasked with awarding a public contract for a vital infrastructure project. It is discovered that the administrator's sibling is a senior executive at one of the bidding companies. The administrator is aware of this familial connection and its potential to influence the evaluation process, either consciously or unconsciously. Considering the principles of administrative integrity and public trust as upheld by Algerian administrative law and civil service regulations, what is the most ethically sound and legally compliant course of action for the administrator? Option A. Award the contract to the siblings' company if their bid is competitive, arguing that personal connections should not preclude fair competition. Option B. Immediately recuse themselves from all aspects of the contract award process and formally declare the conflict of interest to their superior. Option C. Proceed with the evaluation but ensure strict adherence to all objective criteria, believing their impartiality can overcome the familial tie. Option D. Delegate the entire decision-making authority for this contract award to a junior colleague without disclosing the familial relationship. The correct answer is B. Immediately recuse themselves from all aspects of the contract award process and formally declare the conflict of interest to their superior. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical imperative of maintaining impartiality and avoiding conflicts of interest, which are fundamental principles in public administration and governance, particularly within the Algerian context, as governed by its administrative law and civil service regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing personal relationships with the professional duty to act in the public interest without bias. A decision-maker must navigate the potential for perceived or actual favoritism, which can undermine public trust and the integrity of administrative processes. The correct approach involves recusing oneself from any decision-making process where a conflict of interest, or even the appearance of one, exists. This aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative ethics enshrined in Algerian law, which emphasize transparency, fairness, and the avoidance of personal gain or undue influence in public duties. Specifically, Algerian administrative law and civil service statutes often contain provisions requiring public officials to declare potential conflicts of interest and to abstain from participating in decisions that could benefit themselves, their family, or close associates. This proactive measure safeguards the integrity of the decision-making process and ensures that outcomes are based on objective criteria and the public good, rather than personal connections. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the decision despite the familial relationship. This would constitute a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violate specific articles within Algerian administrative law or civil service regulations that prohibit nepotism and mandate impartiality. Such an action could lead to accusations of favoritism, legal challenges to the administrative act, and damage to the reputation of the individual and the institution. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the decision to a subordinate without proper oversight or justification, as this could be seen as an attempt to circumvent the conflict of interest rather than address it directly and ethically. This might still be viewed as an abdication of responsibility and an indirect influence on the decision. Professionals in public administration should employ a structured decision-making framework when faced with potential conflicts of interest. This framework typically involves 1. Identifying the potential conflict, recognizing the personal relationship and its proximity to the decision at hand. 2. Consulting relevant regulations and ethical guidelines, reviewing Algerian administrative law, civil service codes, and internal institutional policies. 3. Seeking advice, consulting with supervisors, ethics officers, or legal counsel. 4. Declaring and recusing, formally declaring the conflict and withdrawing from the decision-making process. 5. Documenting the process, recording the steps taken to manage the conflict. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made in accordance with legal and ethical standards, thereby upholding public trust and administrative integrity. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals that a particular public administration department in Algeria is operating with significant redundancies and outdated processes, suggesting that a substantial restructuring could lead to improved service delivery and cost savings. However, the study does not detail the potential impact on the department's workforce or the legal implications of such a reorganization under Algerian administrative law. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Proceed with implementing the restructuring immediately to capitalize on the identified efficiency gains, assuming that any necessary adjustments to the workforce can be managed post-implementation. Option B. Focus solely on the cost-saving aspects highlighted by the efficiency study, prioritizing financial efficiency over any potential disruption to the existing workforce or administrative procedures. Option C. Initiate a series of consultations with senior management to gauge their general opinion on restructuring, without formally assessing the specific legal or human resource implications. Option D. Commission a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the potential effects of the restructuring on service delivery, operational costs, and crucially, the legal rights and welfare of the affected public servants, in strict adherence to Algerian administrative regulations and public service codes. The correct answer is A. Proceed with implementing the restructuring immediately to capitalize on the identified efficiency gains, assuming that any necessary adjustments to the workforce can be managed post-implementation. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential need for significant restructuring within a public administration department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the imperative for administrative efficiency, as mandated by Algerian public sector regulations, with the ethical considerations of employee welfare and adherence to established legal frameworks governing public employment. The decision-maker must navigate potential resistance to change, ensure transparency, and uphold principles of fairness. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously analyzes the potential consequences of the proposed restructuring on all stakeholders, including employees, service delivery, and the department's overall objectives. This assessment must be grounded in Algerian administrative law, which emphasizes due process, consultation, and the protection of public servants' rights. Specifically, relevant decrees and circulars concerning public service reform and personnel management would guide the process, ensuring that any changes are legally sound, ethically defensible, and implemented with due consideration for the human element. The focus is on a data-driven, legally compliant, and ethically responsible evaluation of the proposed changes before implementation. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement the restructuring based solely on the efficiency study's findings, without further analysis. This fails to comply with Algerian administrative procedures that often require impact assessments and consultation before significant organizational changes. It also overlooks the ethical obligation to consider the welfare of public employees and the potential disruption to public services. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings above all else, potentially leading to dismissals or redeployments that violate labor laws or established personnel policies. This demonstrates a disregard for legal protections and ethical responsibilities towards employees. A third incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers operational efficiency, neglecting the broader socio-economic and legal implications. thereby failing to meet the comprehensive requirements of responsible public administration as envisioned by Algerian governance principles. Professionals in this situation should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the legal and regulatory landscape governing public administration in Algeria. This includes identifying all relevant laws, decrees, and circulars pertaining to organizational reform, personnel management, and public service ethics. The next step is to define the scope and methodology of the impact assessment, ensuring it covers all critical areas. Subsequently, data collection and analysis should be conducted rigorously, involving input from relevant departments and potentially employee representatives. Finally, decisions should be made based on a holistic evaluation of the findings, prioritizing legal compliance, ethical considerations, and the long-term sustainability and effectiveness of public administration. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that a proposed infrastructure project in a coastal region of Algeria has the potential for significant environmental impacts, including habitat disruption and water quality degradation. The administration is under pressure to expedite the project for economic development. Which approach best balances the immediate need for development with long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance? Option A. Conduct a thorough, multidisciplinary environmental impact assessment that includes public consultation and proposes mitigation strategies before project approval. Option B. Rely solely on the developer's initial environmental report, assuming their expertise guarantees compliance with national standards. Option C. Focus on public opinion polls to gauge community sentiment, using this as the primary basis for project approval or rejection. Irrespective of detailed environmental data, Option D. Prioritize immediate project commencement to stimulate economic growth, deferring detailed environmental impact studies until after construction begins. The correct answer is D. Prioritize immediate project commencement to stimulate economic growth, deferring detailed environmental impact studies until after construction begins. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the administrator to balance the immediate need for public service delivery with the long-term implications of resource allocation and potential environmental impact. The administrator must exercise careful judgment to ensure that decisions are not only expedient, but also sustainable and compliant with national environmental and administrative law. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that considers all relevant environmental, social, and economic factors. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of good governance and sustainable development, which are fundamental to Algerian administrative law and public policy. Specifically, Algerian environmental protection laws mandate that any project or policy with potential environmental consequences undergo a thorough assessment to identify, predict, and evaluate the impacts, and to propose mitigation measures. This ensures that public administration acts responsibly, safeguarding natural resources for future generations while meeting current societal needs. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without considering environmental consequences fails to adhere to the precautionary principle embedded in environmental legislation. This can lead to irreversible ecological damage, increased long-term remediation costs, and potential legal challenges for non-compliance. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on public opinion without a scientific basis for impact assessment risks making decisions that are politically popular but environmentally unsound or economically inefficient in the long run. This disregards the administrative duty to make evidence-based decisions. Finally, an approach that delegates the entire assessment process to external consultants without adequate internal oversight or validation can lead to a loss of institutional knowledge and accountability, potentially resulting in assessments that do not fully reflect national priorities or legal requirements. Professionals in public administration should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the legal and regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable laws, decrees, and guidelines, particularly those related to environmental protection and administrative procedure. The next step is to define the scope of the impact assessment, ensuring it is comprehensive and considers all potential consequences. Data collection and analysis should be rigorous and evidence-based. Finally, decision-making should involve a multi-stakeholder consultation process, where findings are transparently communicated and integrated into a final decision that balances competing interests while upholding legal and ethical obligations. Question 20. Upon reviewing the preliminary proposal for a large-scale infrastructure project requiring significant land acquisition and resource utilization in a region known for its ecological sensitivity and diverse local communities, what is the most appropriate administrative approach to ensure compliance with Algerian national development goals and environmental protection mandates? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive and independent environmental and social impact assessment, ESIA, involving extensive stakeholder consultation and expert review, adhering strictly to Law No. 01-19. Option B. Conduct a limited internal technical review of the project's direct environmental footprint, assuming that broader societal and ecological impacts will be managed by local authorities. Option C. Proceed with the project based on initial feasibility studies, focusing on expediting economic benefits and addressing any environmental concerns only if they become critical during implementation. Option D. Prioritize the project's rapid approval by minimizing the scope of the impact assessment to focus only on the most obvious and immediate environmental risks, thereby streamlining the administrative process. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive and independent environmental and social impact assessment, ESIA, involving extensive stakeholder consultation and expert review, adhering strictly to Law No. 01-19. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for administrative efficiency and the long-term imperative of sustainable development, as mandated by Algerian national policy and administrative law. The decision-maker must balance competing interests, including economic growth, environmental protection, and social equity, all within the framework of Algerian administrative procedures and environmental impact assessment regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach aligns with the principles of good governance and the rule of law, as established by Algerian administrative courts and the relevant ministries. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive and independent environmental and social impact assessment, ESIA, that considers all potential consequences of the infrastructure project. This aligns with Article 15 of the Algerian Constitution, which emphasizes the state's duty to protect the environment and promote sustainable development, and with Law No. 01-19 relating to environmental impact assessment. This approach ensures that all stakeholders are consulted, potential risks are identified and mitigated, and the project's long-term viability and societal benefit are thoroughly evaluated before any irreversible decisions are made. It upholds the principles of transparency, public participation, and precautionary action, which are cornerstones of sound administrative practice in Algeria. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate economic gains without a thorough ESIA fails to comply with Law No. 01-19. This bypasses the legal requirement for assessing environmental and social impacts, potentially leading to irreversible ecological damage, social unrest, and long-term economic costs associated with remediation and conflict resolution. Such an approach also violates the spirit of Article 15 of the Constitution by neglecting the state's responsibility to protect the environment for future generations. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on internal technical assessments without independent verification or public consultation ignores the principles of good governance and administrative transparency. This can lead to biased evaluations, overlooking critical external factors, and failing to build public trust. It contravenes the procedural requirements of Algerian administrative law, which often mandates public consultation for projects with significant public impact. A further incorrect approach that seeks to minimize the scope of the impact assessment to expedite approval, without genuinely addressing all potential environmental and social ramifications, is ethically unsound and legally risky. This approach undermines the integrity of the assessment process and can expose the administration to legal challenges and reputational damage. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to responsible governance and sustainable development, which are fundamental expectations of public administration in Algeria. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic evaluation of all available information, clear understanding of the relevant legal and regulatory framework, including constitutional provisions, specific laws like Law No. 01-19, and any relevant decrees or ministerial guidelines, and a commitment to ethical principles. Professionals should prioritize a process that ensures thoroughness, transparency, public participation, and adherence to the long-term goals of sustainable development as enshrined in Algerian national policy.